The observation deck was the quietest place on the research station. It was a large, circular room with a clear dome for a ceiling. Outside, the stars were like tiny, sharp holes in a black blanket. There was no sound but the low hum of the ship's systems. Gene liked it here. It was a good place to think. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the view. Next to him was Mina. She was looking at the datapad in her hand, her brow slightly furrowed. They were both waiting. Their companions for this meeting were not human. They were Valorians. The Valorians were a species known across the galaxy. They were famous for their strength, their honor, and their history as warriors. Kale was a Valorian warrior. He was tall, much taller than Gene, with thick, gray skin that looked like stone. A series of bony plates ran from his forehead over his bald head and down his neck. He stood perfectly still, his arms crossed. He was the picture of discipline. The other Valorian was Lyra, a scientist. She had the same sturdy build and cranial plates, but her eyes held a calmer, more curious light. She was working at a large holographic console. "Are we ready to begin?" Lyra's voice was a soft, low hum, like a cello string. "Yes, we are ready," Gene said, turning from the stars. He gave a small, polite smile. He was a xenobiologist. His job was to understand other species. Mina was a data analyst. Her job was to understand numbers. Together, they were part of a project to create a shared future between humans and Valorians. "The genetic sequencing is complete," Lyra said. A large, bright hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It showed two twisting, glowing ladders, the DNA of a Valorian and the DNA of a human. This project aims to find the biological roots of cooperation, to understand what makes a species successful. Kale made a low sound in his throat. Success for a species is strength, discipline, the will to fight and protect what is yours. He looked at Gene and Mina. "No offense to your people. You are good talkers." "None taken," Gene said, his smile still in place. He was used to this. To the Valorians, humans were clever and good with machines but physically weak. They were builders, not fighters. Lyra continued. "A key part of this study is to map what we call aggression codes. These are specific gene sequences. They control deep, instinctual behaviors, territorial defense, the predator-prey response, the drive to resolve conflict through physical dominance." The hologram zoomed in on sections of the DNA. Parts of the Valorian helix lit up in a bright, fiery orange. There were many of them. "As you can see," Lyra said, a hint of pride in her hum, "the Valorian genome has a significant number of these markers. They are the foundation of our warrior culture. Our models predicted we would possess a far greater concentration of these codes than your species." The hologram shifted. Now, the human DNA helix was highlighted. Gene and Mina leaned in. The sections lit up in the same fiery orange. But there weren't just a few. There were many, many more. The screen flashed, and a bar graph appeared next to the DNA. One bar, labeled Valorian, was high. The other bar, labeled human, was 3 times higher. The number 317% flashed below it in silent, glaring numbers. The hum of the station seemed to grow louder in the silence. Kale was the first to move. He uncrossed his arms, his heavy brow furrowing. The bony plates on his head darkened to a deep purple. For a Valorian, this was a sign of great shock or anger. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice losing its calm hum and becoming sharper. "Your machines are faulty. Rerun the analysis." Lyra was staring at the data, her own plates shifting to a lighter shade of blue, indicating confusion. "I have already verified it 3 times, Commander Kale. The data is correct. The human genome contains more than 3 times the number of aggression codes we possess." "That is not possible," Kale insisted. He gestured toward Gene and Mina. "Look at them. They are soft. They break easily. They avoid honest conflict. They use words where they should use action. These creatures are not aggressive. They are negotiators." Gene felt a strange tightness in his chest. The number on the screen was shocking. He looked at his own hands, then at Kale's powerful, three-fingered ones. It didn't make sense. Mistress Lyra, Mina spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clear. She was still looking at her datapad. Is it possible the function of these genes is different in humans? The label aggression code is a Valerian definition. Perhaps in humans, these genes code for something else. Like what? Kale asked, his tone still dismissive. Mina looked up, meeting his gaze. Perseverance, the drive to complete a difficult task. Ambition, the desire to achieve a goal, no matter the obstacles. She glanced at Jean, looking for support. Yes, Jean said, latching onto the idea. Think of human history. We climbed mountains just to see what was on the other side. We built cities in deserts and on ice. We looked at the stars and decided to go there, even though it was incredibly hard. That isn't aggression as you see it. That's a different kind of fire. Lyra seemed thoughtful. A fascinating hypothesis. The same genetic tool used for a different purpose. In Valorians, it builds a warrior. In humans, it builds a climber? A builder. Kale was not convinced. The purple hue on his head plates had not faded. He looked at the two humans as if he was seeing them for the first time. He saw their smooth skin, their lack of natural armor, their small stature. But now, behind that, he saw the ghost of that staggering number. 317%. If this is true, Kale said slowly, then you are not the peaceful species you claim to be. You are a sleeping beast. You are hiding your true nature behind a mask of words and diplomacy. That is not true, Jean said, his voice firm. We have the same genes, but we have learned to control them. Our civilization is built on cooperation, not conflict. Is it? Kale challenged. Or have you simply found more complex ways to fight? Ways that do not look like fighting to us. The meeting ended shortly after. The air in the room had grown thick and heavy. The shared goal of cooperation now had a massive, confusing crack in ITS. They walked back to the human section of the station. Mina was quiet. That did not go well, Jean finally said. No, it did not, Mina agreed. They see a number. They don't understand what it means. But do we? Jean asked, stopping in the corridor. Do we really understand what that number means? Mina? 3 times? What does that say about us? Mina looked at him. It says we are human. It doesn't say we are monsters. Kale thinks aggression is a simple thing. A switch you flip for a fight. For us, I think it's more complicated. The seed had been planted. For the Valorians, it was a seed of doubt and suspicion about their human allies. For the humans, it was a seed of uncomfortable self-reflection. The quiet research station was no longer just a place of science. It had become a place where the very nature of humanity was being questioned, and the answers were written in a genetic code they were only just beginning to understand. The news of the genetic finding spread through the station like a quiet virus. It moved through the human sections in hushed, confused conversations. It moved through the Valerian sections in low, concerned hums. The station, which had once felt like a place of shared purpose, now felt divided. Jean felt the change immediately. The Valerian scientists and crew members who usually greeted him with a polite, if somewhat distant, nod now looked at him differently. Their glances were longer. Their eyes seemed to be searching for something behind his own. They were not looks of anger, but of deep confusion and a new, wary suspicion. He was no longer just the clever human biologist. He was the representative of a species with triple the aggression codes. Mina spent most of her time in the data analysis lab, trying to find a better explanation. She ran simulations, comparing the human genetic sequences to known behavioral models. But the data was stubborn. The codes were there, linked to brain chemistry associated with drive, risk-taking, and territoriality. She could not make the number go away. Kale was the most affected. He walked the corridors with a heavier step. His usual patrols of the station now felt like inspections of a potential threat. He had built his entire worldview on a simple truth. The Valorians were the galaxy's strongest, most disciplined warriors. Now, that truth was challenged by a piece of data from a species he considered physically inferior. It made no sense to him. How could a creature with such soft skin and fragile bones be more aggressive than a Valerian? This tension found a small, but significant, release in the station's main mess hall. The mess hall was a large room with long tables. It was usually a place of quiet, separate meals. Humans sat with humans. Valorians sat with Valorians. Today, Jean and Mina were eating together, discussing their work in low voices. Tay, the human chief of security, was sitting a few tables away, drinking coffee and reviewing a report on a datapad. A young Valerian warrior named Bor entered the mess hall. He was large, even for a Valerian, and the bony plates on his head were a constant, aggressive red, showing his youthful pride. He had heard the rumors. He had seen the looks his commander, Kale, was giving the humans. He decided to test the theory. Bor walked not to the food dispenser, but directly toward the table where Tay was sitting. He moved with a deliberate, swaggering gait. He did not alter his path. He walked straight into Tay's chair, bumping it hard with his leg. The impact was solid. Tay's coffee sloshed out of his cup, splashing onto his datapad and the table. The sound of the collision echoed in the quiet room. Every human and Valerian in the mess hall stopped what they were doing and looked. This was a classic Valerian provocation. A direct, physical challenge. The expected response was immediate. A Valerian would have stood up, chest out, and issued a formal challenge for the dishonor. It was how conflict started, and how they were resolved. Tay did not do that. He slowly placed his datapad on the table. He looked at the spilled coffee. Then he turned his head and looked up at Bor. His face was completely calm. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was no fear either. It was a cold, flat, assessing look. He saw the young warrior's proud stance, his red plates, his clenched fists, Tay's own hands, resting on the table, were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were bone white. The muscles in his jaw were tight, but his voice, when he spoke, was level and controlled. He did not speak to Bor. He tapped the communication device on his chest. Security Chief Tay to all points. All secure in Mess Hall 3. Just a little clumsiness. Nothing to concern anyone. He then returned his gaze to Bor. He did not look away. He did not blink. He just stared, his expression unchanging, waiting. Bor stood there, confused. The script was broken. There was no fight. There was no loud argument. There was only this quiet, intense pressure from the human stare. The Valerian felt his own aggressive energy with no place to go. It faded, leaving him feeling foolish and exposed. The red hue of his cranial plates flickered and faded to a dull gray, a sign of embarrassment. He grunted, turned away, and walked quickly to the food dispenser, his tail tucked slightly. The incident was over in less than a minute. The mess hall slowly returned to its quiet activity. But the atmosphere had changed. Later, in the security office, Mina replayed the footage on a large screen. Jean stood beside her, watching. "It was a test," Jean said quietly. "Of course it was," Mina replied. She zoomed in on Tay's face. "Look at his expression. No yelling. No threats." Then she pointed to another part of the screen. "But look here. Look at his hands." Jean looked. He saw Tay's hands, clenched into fists so tight they were shaking. "He was feeling it," Mina said. "The aggression, the anger. Anyone would. But he didn't let it out. He controlled it." She switched the view to a biometric readout from the room sensors. His heart rate spiked. Adrenaline levels jumped. His body was ready for a fight. But his mind said no. "Why?" Jean asked. "Why not just stand up to him?" "Because it wasn't efficient," Mina said simply. "Think about it. What would fighting Bor achieve? A broken chair? An injured human security chief? An injured Valerian warrior? A major diplomatic incident? The cost was too high." Tay assessed the situation in a second. He saw a young, proud kid trying to start a fight. The best way to win was not to fight at all. It was to make the kid look stupid and defuse the whole thing. Jean understood. The Valorians saw aggression as a simple on-off switch. When challenged, the switch flips to on, and you fight. For humans, it was not a switch. It was a dial. And humans had learned, through a long and bloody history, how to turn that dial with careful precision. Sometimes you turned it all the way up. Sometimes you turned it down to 0. The skill was in knowing the difference. He channeled it, Gene murmured, thinking of his own words from before. The spark. He used it to fuel his control, not his anger. Exactly, Mina said, pausing the video on Tay's calm, resolute face. The Valorians think our high aggression means we're always on the edge of exploding. They don't understand. For us, that constant high-pressure drive is normal. We live with it every day. We have to control it or our society would tear itself apart. That's what those genes are for. They give us the energy, the drive, the sheer stubbornness to control ourselves, to build complex things, to think 10 steps ahead in a conflict instead of just one. The genetic finding had not revealed a hidden monster. It had revealed the engine of human civilization. It was the power that allowed them to suppress an immediate, satisfying reaction for a better, long-term outcome. It was the source of their patience, their perseverance, and their terrifying, quiet self-control. And as the station drifted in the silent blackness of space, the Valorians were only just beginning to sense the shape of the walls that contained that human fire. The station was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. The repairs from the Scuttler incident were finished. The broken glass was replaced, the scorch marks were cleaned, and the systems hummed normally. But the memory of what happened hung in the air. The way the humans had moved, the things they had done, it changed things. 2 days after the event, Gene was in the medbay. A medic was applying a clean bandage to his hand. He had a small cut from flying glass he had not even noticed during the chaos. The door slid open and Kale stood there. The large Valerian looked out of place in the sterile, white room. "May I enter?" Kale asked. His tone was not the proud command of a warrior. It was the respectful request of a visitor. "Of course," Gene said, surprised. The medic finished and left them alone. Kale stood near the bed, his hands behind his back. He looked at Jin's bandaged hand. "It is a small injury," Kale said. "Yes. I was lucky." "Luck was not the reason you are unharmed," Kale said. He was silent for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I have reviewed the security footage many times. I have spoken to my warriors. I could not understand what I was seeing. So I came to you." Gene waited. "Your security chief," Kale began. "He did not fight with honor. He used tricks. He created distractions. He did not face the enemy directly. According to our ways, his actions were dishonorable." Gene nodded slowly. "I understand that, from your point of view. But he saved lives," Kale said. "He saved your life. He saved the life of your friend Mina. He even saved the lives of my warriors, who were failing to contain the threat." He looked directly at Gene. "This is the contradiction I cannot resolve. How can a dishonorable action be the right action?" Gene took a deep breath. This was the heart of it. "Kale, your people are magnificent warriors. Your honor code is strong. But it is a code for warriors. It assumes a certain kind of fight. A fair fight. Is a fight not a fight? Not for humans," Gene said. "Our history is not just about warriors facing each other on a battlefield. It is about small, weak tribes surviving against giant predators. It is about starving people finding a way to grow food in bad soil. It is about sick people fighting diseases they cannot see. We did not survive because we were the strongest or the most honorable. We survived because we were the most stubborn. We survived because we would use any tool, any trick, any piece of knowledge to live." He pointed toward the door, to the station beyond. "What you saw Tay do was not a warrior's move. It was a survivor's move. He did not care about honor. He cared about results. He cared about protecting people. The same genes that make a Valerian stand tall and fight face-to-face, in a human, make us pick up a rock or dig a trap or create a steam explosion with a power cable." Kale's cranial plates shifted to a thoughtful blue. "The aggression codes. Yes, Jean said. You see them as a key that unlocks a door to combat. For us, they are not a key. They are the engine. They give us the energy, the drive, the sheer will. The will to do whatever it takes. To overcome, Kale said, remembering Jin's earlier word. To overcome, Jean agreed. Anything. Predator. A mountain. A disease. Or a confused, dangerous animal on a space station. The goal is always the same. Overcome the obstacle. How we do it does not matter, as long as it works. Kale was silent, processing this. His entire life, he had believed that how you fought was as important as why you fought. For these humans, the why was everything. The how was just a detail. So when you are patient, Kale said, thinking out loud, when you use words instead of fists, that is not a lack of aggression. It is the highest form of aggression, Jean said. It is aggression directed against the very idea of failure. It is the aggressive pursuit of a peaceful solution. It is harder, much harder, to be patient than it is to hit something. Takes more energy, more control. That is what our genes give us. Not a love for fighting, but a deep, powerful hatred for losing. Kale looked at Jean, really looked at him. He saw the soft skin, the lack of armor, the calm eyes. But now he saw something else underneath. He saw the walls of that control. He saw the immense pressure of that will, held in check every second of every day. He saw the engine, always running. I thought your high aggression meant you were a sleeping beast, Kale admitted, his voice low. I was wrong. You are not a beast. A beast is simple. It attacks when it is angry. You are something else. You are a species that is always at war. Not with others, but with the universe itself. You see a mountain and you must climb it. You see a star and you must reach it. You see a problem and you must solve it. This is your true nature. Jean smiled a little. It is. We are never satisfied. We are always pushing. That push can be for good things like building this station, or it can be for terrible things. The choice is ours. The engine is the same. Kale finally understood. The number 317% was not a measure of how often they would fight. It was a measure of their potential. It was the sheer volume of their will to exist, to achieve, to become. It could make them the best allies in the galaxy, or the most terrifying enemies. There was no in-between. He stood up straight. Thank you, Jean. You have helped me see. He gave a slow, deep nod, a Valerian gesture of great respect and gratitude. The honor is in the result. I will remember this. He turned and left the medbay. Jean sat on the bed, looking at his bandaged hand. He felt a sense of relief. The misunderstanding was not completely gone, but a bridge had been built. The Valorians had tested their DNA looking for a simple answer. They had found a question instead. And the question was, what will humanity choose to do with its relentless, terrible, and beautiful will? The silence after the fight was heavy. The red emergency lights continued to flash, painting everyone in shades of blood and shadow. The only sounds were the crackle of the damaged conduit and the slow hiss of steam from the pipe Tay had used. The air smelled of ozone, burnt insulation, and something acidic from the creature's blood. Jean was the first to move. He rushed to Mina. Are you hurt? She shook her head, her eyes wide as she looked from the dead creature to Tay.
No, I'm okay.
Tay was flexing his hand. The gloves were ruined, and the skin beneath was red and blistered. He looked at his hand with a detached expression, as if it belonged to someone else. Then he looked at his team.
Yeah.
Report. All secure, Chief. No human casualties. Minor environmental damage in the hallway. Tay gave a single, sharp nod. His job was done. On the other side of the broken window, the Valorians were checking on their own. 2 of their warriors were injured, but their armor had saved them from serious harm. They looked at the dead scuttler, then through the shattered viewport at the humans. Their expressions were unreadable, but their body language was stiff with a new kind of tension. It was not suspicion anymore. It was something closer to awe and a little fear. Kale finally stepped through the broken window, careful to avoid the live wires. He walked slowly toward Tay. He stopped a few feet away, his large frame towering over the human. He looked at Tay's burned hand. He looked at the smoldering conduit on the floor. He looked at the welding torch in Ji's hand. He looked at the exploded light fixtures in the ceiling. His gaze finally returned to Tay's face. Tay met his look calmly. There was no pride there.
No gloating.
Just the steady look of a man who had done a difficult job. What was that? Kale asked, his voice a low, rough hum. It was not an accusation. It was a genuine question, filled with confusion. It was a containment procedure, Tay said. His voice even. Kale shook his head, the bony plates on his scalp shifting to a muted, thoughtful gray.
No.
That was not a procedure. That was chaos. You did not form a line. You did not face the enemy directly. You shot the ceiling. You used fire on the floor. You created steam. He pointed at the conduit. You used a live power cable as a weapon. There was no plan. There was a plan, Mina said, stepping forward. Her voice was soft but clear. It was just our plan, not yours. Jean joined her. He assessed the situation. He used every tool we had. He used us. He used the environment. The goal wasn't to fight the creature honorably. The goal was to stop it from hurting anyone. The goal was to win. Win. Kale repeated the word as if it was new to him. To us, winning a fight is about facing your opponent with strength and honor. What you did, it had no honor. It was tricks. Tay finally spoke again. Commander Kale, was anyone killed? Kale was silent for a moment.
No.
Are any of your warriors permanently injured?
No.
Are the civilians safe? Tay gestured to Jean and Mina. Yes. Then the mission was a success, Tay said. The honor is in the result, in protecting life, not in the method. Kale looked back into the lab at his own warriors. Their methods had almost failed. Their straight lines and direct attacks had been useless against the fast, clever creature. The human's chaotic, adaptive, and unpredictable actions had saved everyone, including his own men. He thought about the genetic report, the triple aggression codes. He had imagined a human losing control, a roaring beast. He had not imagined this. A man so in control of his aggression that he could channel it into ripping a live wire from the floor to create a steam explosion. The aggression was not in the anger. It was in the terrifying, focused will to do whatever was necessary. Your genes, Kale said slowly, turning to Jean. You said they were for perseverance, for ambition. Jean looked at the scene of controlled destruction around them. Yes, to persevere means to keep going, no matter what. To find a way when there seems to be no way. To be ambitious means to want to succeed so badly that you will think of 100 different ways to do it. That is what you saw. That is the fire. Channeled. Kale was silent for a long time. The alarms had stopped. The red lights were replaced by the normal, bright white light of the station. In the clean light, the scene looked even more dramatic. The shattered window, the scorched walls, the smashed lights. I need to understand this, Kale said finally. He was not talking to anyone in particular. He was stating a new mission for himself. He gave a stiff, formal nod to Tay, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another. Then he turned and walked away, back to his people. His mind racing, the cleanup began. Engineers arrived to repair the damage. Medical teams checked on everyone. Jean, Mina, and Tay walked together back toward the human sector. As they walked, Mina looked at Tay's hand. You should get that looked at. It's fine, Tay said. That was incredible, Jean said. And terrifying. You didn't even hesitate.
Tay shrugged.
There was a problem. We solved it. We used the tools we had. But the wire, you could have been electrocuted. It was a calculated risk, Tay said. The insulation on the gloves was good for a few seconds. The coolant was right there. It was the fastest way to create a large enough distraction to save Mina. He said it so simply, as if it was obvious. There was no drama in his voice. He saw a problem, he saw a solution, and he acted. The immense drive, the aggression to overcome the obstacle, was directed with the precision of a surgeon's knife. Mina understood now. The high aggression codes were not about a constant desire for violence. They were about a constant, burning need to overcome, to solve, to win, in a fight that meant being more adaptive, more creative, and more ruthless than your opponent. In life, it meant building civilizations and reaching for the stars. The Valorians tested their DNA and found a weapon. But they were wrong about what kind of weapon it was. It was not a simple club. It was the human mind itself, a forge where aggression was hammered into willpower, and willpower was shaped into an unstoppable tool. The station was quiet. It was the middle of the sleep cycle for most of the crew. The only sounds were the constant, gentle hum of the life support systems and the occasional soft footstep of a security patrol. In the main laboratory, a large, sealed containment field glowed with a soft blue light. Inside, a creature slept. It was a specimen from a recently explored world. A six-legged thing with a hard, segmented shell and sharp, cutting limbs. The scientists called it a scuttler. It was heavily sedated. Jean was in his quarters, reading a book on a datapad. Mina was in the data analysis lab, running one last simulation on the genetic data. She could not let it go. She felt there was an answer there, a key to making the Valorians understand. In the security office, Tay was drinking a cup of coffee and watching the station's camera feeds. Everything was green. Everything was normal. Then, everything was not. A deep, resonant shudder ran through the entire station. The lights flickered, died for a terrifying second, and then came back on, now casting a dim, red glow. A blaring alarm cut through the silence, so loud it felt physical. Containment breach in main lab, containment breach in main lab. The automated voice was calm, but the words were not. In his quarters, Jean dropped his datapad and ran for the door. The hallway was filled with red emergency light and the flashing of alarm beacons. He saw two human engineers running in the opposite direction, toward the engineering bay.in the data lab. Mina's screens went black for a moment before rebooting with emergency protocols. A warning flashed: structural integrity compromised, lab sector. Tay was already on his feet, his coffee forgotten. His comm device buzzed with frantic reports. Security teams to main lab. Valorian guards are engaging. The specimen is loose. The scuttler was not sedated anymore. The power surge had disrupted the containment field and the sedative dispensers at the same time. It was awake, confused, and territorial. It was also very, very fast. When the first Valorian security team arrived, they formed a perfect phalanx at the lab's entrance. They moved as one unit, their large energy pikes humming with power. They were disciplined. They were brave. They were predictable. The scuttler was not. It did not charge the line of warriors. It moved with a skittering, jerky speed, climbing up the wall and across the ceiling, avoiding their direct frontal assault. It was not trying to fight them. It was trying to escape the room. "Hold the line," their sergeant hummed. The scuttler dropped from the ceiling behind them. One of the Valorian warriors turned, but he was too slow. A sharp, bladed limb sliced through the air, hitting the warrior's armor and throwing him back against a console with a crash. The phalanx broke, turning to face the new threat from behind. The creature was intelligent. It used the lab's terrain against them, jumping over tables, knocking over equipment, using the chaos as cover. The Valorians, trained for open combat, were struggling. Their powerful energy blasts scorched the walls but missed the agile target. Another warrior was knocked down, his pike clattering to the floor. From the hallway, Jean and Mina arrived at the same time. They stopped at the observation window, their hearts pounding. They saw the Valorians being outmaneuvered. They saw the large, angry creature moving with a terrifying purpose. "Where is Tay?" Jean shouted over the alarm. As if in answer, the creature, startled by a sparking console, slammed its body against the main observation window. A sharp leg hit the reinforced transparasteel. A spiderweb of cracks appeared. The window held, but then a spray of the creature's acidic blood hit the surface where it was cracked. The blood sizzled and ate into the material, with a sound of tearing metal and shattering glass. a large section of the viewport gave way. At the same time, a heavy power conduit, shaken loose from the ceiling during the initial surge, fell in a shower of sparks. It landed with a crash between the Valorians and the broken window, creating a curtain of live electricity. The scuttler, seeing an escape route, scrambled over the sparking conduit, ignoring the shocks, and pushed its way through the broken window into the hallway that it was now free in the corridor. And Jean and Mina were directly in its path. The creature turned its multifaceted eyes toward them. It let out a chittering hiss. It lowered its bladed limbs, ready to charge. They were cornered. There was nowhere to run. Kale arrived with a second team of Valorians. He saw the broken window, the sparking conduit, his warriors struggling to get past the electrical hazard, and the two humans facing the creature alone. He saw the creature tense to attack. He knew what honor demanded. He would charge. He would try to draw the creature's attention. It would be a heroic and most likely a fatal action. He gripped his energy pike, took a deep breath, and prepared to run through the sparks. But he never got the chance. Tay and his security team arrived from the opposite end of the hallway. They did not form a line. They did not shout a challenge. Tay took in the entire scene in a single sweeping glance. The trapped Valorians, the sparking conduit, the broken window, the two terrified scientists, the creature about to lunge. His voice was not a scream. It was a sharp, clear command, cutting through the noise of the alarm. Mina. Lifeform analysis now. Weak points. Gene environmental control. Reroute all available power to Section 7 overhead lights. I need a distraction. Now. There was no hesitation. Mina, her training overriding her fear, pulled out her datapad, her fingers flying across the screen. Its underbelly. The joints between the shell segments. They're softer. Jean, understanding immediately, ran to a wall panel, yanking it open and starting to reroute power. Tay did not fire his weapon at the creature. He looked up. He saw the overhead lighting fixtures. He raised his rifle and fired 3 quick shots. The lights in the ceiling directly above the scuttler exploded in a rain of glass and sparks. The sudden darkness and shower of debris made the creature flinch and skitter back, confused. One of Tay's team, a woman named G, didn't need an order. She saw a maintenance welding torch on the wall, used for emergency repairs. She grabbed it, ignited it, and aimed the super-hot blue flame at a floor panel in front of the creature. The metal glowed red, then white. The scuttler, sensitive to heat, recoiled from the sudden barrier, turning away from the heat and toward the sparking conduit that it was being herded. It was being manipulated. The creature, now enraged and disoriented, let out a sharp hiss and lunged. Not at the humans with weapons, but toward Mina, who was still calling out data from her pad. Tay saw it move. He saw the distance. He knew he could not shoot it in time without risking hitting Mina or Jean. He did not scream. He moved. He dropped his rifle. In 2 long strides, he reached the sparking, live power conduit on the floor. Ignoring the danger, he grabbed the insulated section of the cable. His gloves smoked immediately. With a guttural, raw shout of pure effort, he jammed the sparking end of the conduit into a ruptured coolant pipe that was spraying mist onto the floor. There was a loud hiss, and then a blast of superheated steam erupted from the point of contact. The white cloud hit the scuttler head-on, scalding it and throwing it back through the broken window, right into the main lab. It landed, stunned and smoking, directly in front of the Valerian phalanx, which had finally managed to get past the electrical hazard. The Valorians did not hesitate. 3 energy pikes slammed down, pinning the creature to the floor. It thrashed for a moment and then was still. The fight was over. The hallway was filled with silence, broken only by the hiss of steam and the fading alarm. Tay stood, breathing heavily, pulling his smoldering gloves off. GE shut off the welding torch. Jean closed the wall panel. Mina lowered her datapad, her hands shaking. Kale stood on the other side of the sparking conduit, his pike still in his hand, unused. He had not moved from his spot. He had watched the entire chaotic 20-second engagement. He had seen no glorious charge. He had seen no single heroic act. He had seen a storm of precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly efficient violence. He had seen aggression not as a flame but as a tool used by every human in a different way. And he had seen the human security chief, without a moment's thought for his own safety, use the environment itself as a weapon. He looked at the humans, and for the first time, the number 317% did not seem like a mistake. It seemed like a warning. The main chamber of the Galactic Council was a vast circular room. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered seats, their strange and varied forms lit by the soft glow of the central holographic display. The air was filled with the low murmur of translated conversations. Today, they were here to receive the final report on the joint human-Valorian research station and the troubling genetic findings that had emerged from it. Jean and Mina stood to one side of the presentation platform. They wore simple, formal clothing. They looked calm, but inside, they felt a nervous tension. The future of human relations with the galaxy could be shaped by what happened in the next hour. On the other side of the platform stood Lyra and Kale. Lyra looked composed, a data slate in her hand. Kale stood tall in his formal armor, his cranial plates a neutral, official gray. He looked out at the council, his face unreadable. The head of the council, a being with long, slender limbs and large, dark eyes, called the session to order. The floor is granted to the Valorian Science Directorate and their human colleagues for the report on Project Concord. Lyra stepped forward. The central hologram lit up, showing the same DNA strands and the same shocking bar graph that had started everything. Honored members of the council. Lyra began, her voice calm and clear. Our initial findings, as you can see, were unexpected. The human genome was found to contain 317% more of what we classify as aggression codes than the Valorian benchmark. A wave of surprised whispers moved through the chamber. Many of the representatives looked at Jean and Mina with new, worried eyes. One of them, a species known for its deep fear of violence, shrank back in its seat. Lyra continued. This data in isolation was alarming. It suggested a potential for violence far beyond our understanding. It created a period of significant tension aboard the research station. She paused, looking at Kale. He nodded for her to continue. However, Lyra said, her tone shifting, data in isolation is often misleading. A subsequent event, an emergency aboard the station, provided crucial context. It forced us to reevaluate our very definitions. The hologram changed. It showed security footage of the Scuttler incident. The council watched in silence as the Valorian phalanx was outmaneuvered. They saw the creature break free. They saw it corner Jean and Mina. Then they watched the humans respond. They saw Tay shoot out the lights. They saw Gie use the welding torch. They saw Jean rear out power. They saw Mina call out weak points. And they saw Tay grab the live conduit and create the steam blast that saved everyone. The footage ended. The chamber was utterly silent. Kale now stepped forward. He moved to the center of the platform. All eyes were on him. He was a respected warrior, known for his honesty and his strict adherence to Valorian honor. His words would carry great weight. When I first saw this genetic data, Kale's voice boomed through the quiet room. I believed it was a mistake. I looked at my human colleagues and I saw builders, diplomats. I saw no warriors. When the data was confirmed, I believed they were hiding their true nature. I thought they were a sleeping beast, pretending to be peaceful. He turned and looked directly at Jean and Mina. I was wrong. We were all wrong. He faced the council again. We Valorians define aggression as a key. It is a key that unlocks the door to combat. It is simple, direct. We believed that more keys must mean a greater desire to open that door. But humanity does not work that way. He pointed at the frozen image of Tay with the sparking conduit. What you saw in that footage was not a loss of control. It was the highest possible level of control. Their aggression is not a key. It is an engine. It is the source of their power, but it is a power they direct with terrifying precision. He explained what he had learned. For humans, these genes are not about a desire to fight. They are about a refusal to lose. They are about the will to overcome any obstacle, by any means necessary. This is what makes them so dangerous. And it is also what makes them so valuable. Kale's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. Do not mistake their diplomacy for weakness. It is a weapon they choose to use. Do not mistake their patience for a lack of power. It is a sign of their immense control. They are not warriors in the way we know. They are something else entirely. They are survivors. They are adapters. They are problem solvers whose primary tool is their own indomitable will. He turned one last time to the humans. The galaxy tested human DNA looking for a monster. They did not find one. They found a species that has spent its entire history fighting a war against impossibility itself. And they are winning that war. He finished with a declaration that stunned the room. The Valerian benchmark for aggression is obsolete. It measures only the potential for combat. It does not measure the potential for perseverance, for ambition, for creativity under pressure. We must create a new category for what humanity possesses. We do not yet have a name for it, but we have seen its power. Then Kale did something no one in the council had ever seen before. He turned fully to Jean and Mina. He placed his fist over his chest, the Valerian sign of ultimate respect. Then he bowed. It was a deep, formal, and profound bow, held for a long moment. It was a gesture reserved for the most honored of allies, for those who had shown greatness not just in strength, but in spirit. The message was clear. The Valorians, the galaxy's strongest warriors, were acknowledging humanity as equals. No, as something more. A slow applause started from the Valerian delegation. It was picked up by others, until the great chamber echoed with the sound. The fear in the air was gone, replaced by a new, deep respect. Jean and Mina bowed in return. They felt a wave of relief and hope as the council session ended and representatives began to crowd around them. Jean looked at Kale. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You understood." Kale nodded, his plates a calm, steady gray. "I understand enough. I understand that humanity's greatest strength is not in its fists, but in its heart. And that is a strength this galaxy desperately needs." The story of the triple aggression codes would spread across the stars. But it would not be a story of fear. It would be a story of a species that had been tested, and in that testing had revealed not a monster but a partner. A species whose relentless fire was not for destruction, but for building a future, no matter what stood in their way.